Hello and welcome to Female Voices. Today's conversation speaks to a kind of loss that doesn't always get named, the loss of identity that can come from chronic illness and life-altering diagnosis. My guest today, Patti Sauer, a retired Air Force wife. Tell your husband thank you for his service.
I
A
will.
mom of two adult sons, a former teacher of 18 years, and now an author and fierce encourager for those living with chronic illness, lifelong diagnosis, and mental health challenges. Patti lives with chronic regional pain syndrome, a rare and lifelong condition that profoundly changed her health, her career, and how she saw herself in the world. When her body and mind could no longer sustain the pace of the life she once lived, especially the identity she loved as a teacher, Patti was forced into a season of deep reckoning, grief, anger, and ultimate healing. Out of that season came her book, Brave Bird, a collection of poetry and reflections that began as a way of helping others with CRPS feel seen, but unexpectedly grew into something much bigger. And I can't wait to hear about all of that. Her words resonate with people navigating chronic illness, mental health struggles, centered career loss, and identity shifts of all kinds. Patti's story is one of honesty, courage, and hope. And I am so honored to have her join me today. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for
Oh,
asking, and
welcome.
I appreciate it so much. The story
Yeah,
is often unheard, so I appreciate you having me on.
I love to share how sometimes people, where I meet people.
Yeah.
So with Patty, it was just shortly before Christmas.
Mhm.
She works at a local bookstore, well, pretty local, not in my town, but a couple towns away. And I always look for books for my three grandchildren that are from local authors. And I happened upon Patty and we just started talking and found out she was an author and all these things. And I'm like, we need to talk. And then I said, hey, would you like to share your story on the podcast? So it's just so fun meeting people because there's so many women out there, I feel, that have stories that really do need to be shared to
Yeah,
support and help other people. And
definitely.
yours was one of those.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it was fun meeting you, and yeah, it was just an automatic we clicked automatically, and,
Yeah.
so it was perfect. It was a perfect meeting, so
Yeah. Yeah. As we're talking about this, I need to reach out to my grandkids and see because when they opened them, it was funny. When they
Yeah.
opened the books, they were like, okay, I wonder who's going to get through their books the fastest, who's going to read it
Oh,
the fastest. So I need to ask them. I haven't seen
yeah,
them.
who
So
won the race?
yeah, who is the fastest reader of their books? So
Very cool.
anyway, I love doing that.
Yeah.
We'll see how long that continues as they get older. The thing that I wanted to when we got together and we chatted a little bit after meeting that day, we talked a lot about identity, the loss of identity, where you were a teacher for, gosh, almost 2 decades,
Yeah.
and that role deeply shaped who you were. But
Yeah.
when that illness forced you to step away, what did you feel like the grief of the job, your identity, where it was attached, or did you even name it grief?
It's
Or
it
what did you think about at that time?
yeah. So, what's funny is when I was first diagnosed, I didn't really understand it. I didn't
Mhm,
understand what it was. I didn't understand kind of what my body was gonna go through, and how many different systems it affects because it does
mhm.
affect the whole body. So I was like, "Oh, I'll get over this. It's fine. I'll take the medication. I'll, do whatever it takes and I'll be fine. I'll go back to work." And very quickly I found that I wasn't thinking the same. I wasn't feeling the same physically or mentally or emotionally because it affected so many different systems. And so it was coping, a lot of it. And
Mm.
how do I deal with, brain fog? Like, oh, maybe it's perimenopause. That's what I'm dealing with. So I named it other things all throughout.
Interesting.
or just dealt with the symptoms as they came. And I got through COVID. I got through teaching COVID, and which any teachers out there will tell you was, we had to switch gears and we had to be very flexible and learn new things really quickly. And that part scared me. And so it was difficult getting through that with this diagnosis. But there again, I was like, it's fine. I'll be fine. So you tuck it back and you tuck it back. And I
Sure.
think we had this conversation about, as women and moms and even grandmas or aunts or guardians, whatever it is, we stuff things back. I can do this. I'll get through it. I'll just switch something else and it's fine. I'm
Yeah.
not going to worry about it. So it was all of those things. But 7 years ago was the diagnosis. And I made it 5 years before it got to the point physically I couldn't get through the day, or I would get through the day
Mm,
and that would be it. I was mentally, emotionally, physically exhausted. I could not function at all. And so I would come home and I would rest and I would get back up the next day and try to get through another day. And it was on repeat for a very, very long time.
mm,
And the school that I was at the time, there were a lot of disciplinary things happening. I made it very clear up front, my body can't handle this. These kids are larger than me. I was teaching middle school. These kids are bigger than me. And should something happen, if I have to break up a fight or something, I can't get in the middle of it. I can't try to stop it. I just have to let it happen because I can't hurt myself in the process. And so I
mhm,
felt a lot of pressure with, well, it's part of your job. It's part of that conflict negotiation, kind
mm,
of that behavior management part of the classroom, that in a middle school and in a high school even, there is that expectation that you're going to be able to handle every aspect, including the physical aspect. And I just couldn't do it. And I was going into each day, literally going through the motions. And I was having to go back and get sympathetic nerve blockers multiple
mm,
times. I ended up with COVID and then pneumonia after that. And so I could quickly see that my body was reacting to the things that were happening within my career. My body was just
sure.
at a point that I was going to break if I didn't do something. And I felt
Mm,
myself very dissociated from circumstances. I would get home and my husband would ask me what happened at school today, or how was my day? And I was so dissociated between the two things that I was like, I don't know. I don't know what I did today. It was that drive home and it was just a complete block out of what was
wow.
happening. So I could not stuff it back anymore. I couldn't keep it.
Mhm,
And I really hadn't dealt with the disease at all. Hadn't gone through this is going to be for the rest of my life. And how does that look for my life right now moving forward? I
mhm,
never dealt with that. And so it was at that point I said, I cannot do anymore. My body is failing. And so I left. And it immediately, the feeling that I had was failure. I failed at this. And that broke me. That really did. So I felt like I failed at a job. I failed at a career that I loved. I didn't make
mhm,
it to that 20-year, retirement
mm,
everybody tries to reach
yeah,
for. I was 2 years short of that. I had to quit mid-year, which as a teacher, it's devastating to leave mid-year, and you always tell yourself, "No, I'm gonna push through to the very end," and I told myself I would never leave mid-year, and I left
mm,
mid-year. It was another I failed at that. I said I was gonna do something, and I failed at that. And so once I was home, it began, I don't know what to do with me from here.
mm,
My husband and I are empty nesters. So we were empty nesters at that point. So I didn't have kids going to school. I didn't have that mom job anymore. My husband was retired but was working. So I didn't have that Air Force wife thing anymore. And now I didn't
mm,
have this career. And I did not know where I was going from there. I had no other piece of me is what I felt like,
mm.
and I spiraled. I I was in such despair and such sadness and such grief about not knowing who I was that I really couldn't get out of it, and it took a while.
You just mentioned all of the kind of identities that you
Mhm.
had as a woman, mother, as a career, all of those things. And the sadness was there. I could totally, and I think many women listening will relate to that.
Yeah.
The spiral, you mentioned the
Yeah.
spiral that happened that you didn't seem to be able to get out of. So, with that said,
Mhm.
and you did mention grief, did you realize at first this is grief, or was this just sadness that
I
you're feeling, depression, or what was those initial things that you felt?
Yeah, initially I thought this I'm just sad because I left. I'm sad because I'm going to miss the students. But it was deeper than that. And I have had depression and anxiety my whole life. So it was one of those, I'm just struggling with my depression or I'm just struggling
Okay.
with something else. But it cut deeper. I just couldn't get out of it. And I knew that I needed to see somebody. I knew that I needed to talk to somebody. And I reached out to a counselor and he said, "You're grieving for your life, for what you have. You had to let that go. And when you have to let something go that defines you,
Mhm.
and you don't have anything to fall back on, you do grieve." And so I didn't
Mhm.
understand it until I spoke to somebody. I just thought that it was just a deep depression that I was in. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you sought out
Yeah.
someone to support and help you, because when that identity, we lose that identity, and you mentioned this early on, like that self-worth,
Hmm.
you know, hits rock bottom. And, sometimes and many times people lose a job and that's still it's still the same, or they're let go. Like I know myself,
Hmm.
I worked twice for people that I was not in control of what happened when I no longer had a job. One company got bought out by another company and I was let go with a bunch of people. The other one filed bankruptcy, so that shut down. But even knowing that it wasn't in any control of
Hmm.
my own or anything like that, it still throws you into deep, almost depression, sadness, hurt, failure, self worth. All of those things just surface anyway, because I think, like you said, and we've talked about, that identity is there.
Right.
And when that identity were questioned, who am I now? What is my identity? Because now I'm jobless. Now I don't have a job. Or with you, it's like I have this illness that has forced me to leave my job. It really rocks your world.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. And I just want to make sure that the listeners understand that
Yeah.
that this happens in all areas of life when our identity shifts
Yeah.
and we're uncertain of who we are.
Right. And I think
Yeah.
we talked about this before, when you get to a point where you're at the next half century of your life, what are you going to do? Uh, and
Yeah.
is this it? When the whole first half of my century was mom and wife and teacher, and then to shift that and have it be completely out of my control. There was
Mhm.
nothing that I could do about it. CRPS, it doesn't happen to everybody. It's very rare disease. Less than 7% of people in the world have CRPS, but yet anybody can get it. Anybody can be diagnosed with it.
Mhm.
It's so out of the ordinary and so out of my control as to what I could do moving forward. And so it
Mhm.
became, how do I redefine myself? How do I find hope that there's going to be something else for me? Um, and what does that look like moving forward? And just
Mhm.
kind of getting out of that deep, deep sadness and hurt and anger and
Yeah.
grief.
Yeah, all those emotions go along with it
Yeah.
for sure. Do you wanna just take a minute and explain what that disease is, just
Sure.
in case the listeners are not familiar or aren't somewhere that they can Google that
Yeah.
and find that out? If you can just share briefly what that is
Sure.
so that they
So
know.
CRPS, it's called chronic regional pain syndrome. And most people just hear chronic and pain. It is much different than just having chronic pain. Chronic regional pain syndrome it affects your sympathetic nervous system, your autonomic nervous system. It can affect your central nervous system
Mhm.
because everything is tied together. So it often is diagnosed after an injury, or it can be diagnosed with no known injury. Oftentimes,
Okay.
a patient will go in with some sort of pain that they've had for a very long time, and have descriptors like burning or it feels like freezing skin sometimes, but burning uncontrollable pain within the body. Mine was a misdiagnosed fracture to my tibia that
Okay.
I had to fight to get treated over a 4-month period to come. And by the time it was treated, it was bad. The CRPS had already set in. And most times patients aren't diagnosed for over a year. There's some people who don't get
Mm,
diagnosed until 10 years, something that they live with for a very long time. So I'm lucky in one regard that I was diagnosed early, but the type of diagnosis, there's CRPS type 1 or type 2. Type 2 generally goes into remission. I have type 1, so I will have this for the rest of my life. And it is debilitating pain. So on the McGill pain scale, which is used in hospitals where they can rate a pain. So, like childbirth from 1 to 50, it has a pain marker. And CRPS is the worst and most painful disease, more than an amputation, more than cancer treatment, more than
mm,
childbirth, more than, I could go on, but it is the highest pain on the McGill pain scale.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And every CRPS patient is different, which means that
Mhm,
their symptoms are different and how they're treated. There is no known cure and
mhm.
there's no one set of medications or treatments that work for every CRPS patient. So you're constantly chasing symptoms, essentially. And that is why
Wow.
it's such a lifelong, considered a lifelong disease.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
sorry that you're having to live with that, and that you're speaking to it, and that you're sharing all this to support and help other people. So I know you had indicated that you went to see a
I
professional,
did.
and then I wanna wind up talking a little bit about your book, but I know you began doing journaling. Was that something just to help you process what was going on? Was that something the therapist suggested? Where did that come in? Or was that just to support and help other people? What was the reasoning
Yeah.
for the journaling
So
and
I've always written, I've always journaled. But I think, like a lot of people, you journal for a little while and then you fall off the wagon, and then you journal
mhm,
for a little while and you
mhm,
fall off. And as a teacher, I would always tell my students, that everyone would always have a journal. And I would say, if you can't say it, if you can't speak to it, you got to write it. You got to get it out. And so
mm,
I tried to do that in the very beginning after I left my job. And I couldn't do it without like pouring tears and
mm,
I couldn't get through it. So when I had talked to my counselor, he said, "Well, what would you tell your students to do?" I was like, "Well, I would tell them to
mm.
write." He's like, "So why aren't you writing?" I'm like, "Okay, thank you for throwing that in my face very much." And so
Tell people to do things that we're not
I'm
doing,
like,
that
"Do
we
as I
know we
say,
should
don't
be
do as
doing.
I do. Come on now." So that's where that came from, and he's like, "I want you to make a
Okay.
more concerted effort to write, and we'll speak to your writing when we meet the next time." And so that became part of the process of acceptance, and he would say, "I want you to write about this," or, "I want you to write about that." And he had asked me, "Well, what did you do before you were a teacher? What did you go to school for? What did you degree?" And I was like, "Well, my initial degree was in English with the emphasis in history and literature, and I really wanted to write. I wanted to be a journalist." He says, he's like, "What are you doing?
Light bulb, light bulb.
What are you doing? What do you mean you've lost your identity? Wasn't that your identity in the beginning?" I was like, "Well, don't yell at me about it. I just was not there." He's like, "Come on."
Perhaps we need just a little
Yeah,
bit
no,
of
he really was like, yeah,
help.
he's like, "Come on, like, here we are." And as I was saying it was like, I feel so stupid right now.
Mm,
But I needed somebody else to kind of pull that out of me. And
sure.
so it became more of a habit, and I got onto a private writing group online, and we would share our writing. And I had someone private message me from the group and asked if I'd ever thought about publishing. And I said,
Mm,
"Well, about 20 years ago, I had a book started, but never finished it. And it was a
mhm.
children's book." And they're like, "But have you ever thought about publishing this?" Because a lot of times we would share poetry or prose or short stories or whatever. A lot of mine was poetry or prose. And they gave me the name of this publishing company and a publicist. They're like, "You really need to talk to this person because I think you have a lot to
Right.
say." And I was like, "Nah, no, no, I don't think so." Anyway, and I brought it up to my counselor, and he's like, "Well, what's the worst that's gonna happen if you just give it to them?" And my first thought was, "It'll be one more thing that I fail at, one more
Oh.
thing that's going to break my heart, and I'm gonna be
Mhm.
back into grieving one more thing." And
Mm.
he's like,
Mm.
"No, the worst that's going to happen is someone is gonna tell you no, and no is an
Mhm.
okay thing, then that doesn't mean you can't write. You can still write." And
Mhm.
so it took me a while, and I finally sent it in, and long story short in that, the publicist came back and said, "How quickly can you get us so many pieces of writing? You do have something to say. We do think that there is value in this, and how
Yeah.
quickly can you get it to us?" Which normally that's totally rare and doesn't happen. So, stomach in the throat and
Yay!
push
Yay!
through, but I didn't want my writing to be all gloom and doom, and I did want it to focus on my CRPS and kind of the emotions and the healing that I had to go through to get to a point of
Mhm.
acceptance and to see the hope on the other side. Because even though I live with it every day, there is grace and there is hope. There are all these other things that I was not recognizing, that were going to
Mhm.
come, but I wasn't there yet until
Yeah.
then. So yeah.
Well, I love that. I love that. And so I have the book. If you're
Yeah.
watching a video, I have the book. I skimmed through it. I haven't read it cover to cover, but it's beautiful. What I have read has been beautiful.
Well,
So
thank
I'm
you.
so glad that you put that out for sure.
Yeah.
So it was interesting when you said about the therapist saying your history, because when we talked and when you were just speaking again, I thought of two different
Yeah.
things that actually, probably three things that I myself or my daughters have
Yeah.
experienced. That my daughter was a
Mhm.
teacher. That was what she went to school. And I think I shared this
Yeah.
with you. And she struggled with getting a job, a full time job, and in the public school system, where of course the pay is more,
Uh-huh.
and ended up dating her now husband. And he said that he wouldn't and you know propose to her until she had a full time job. So she went back to school
Yeah.
to become a respiratory therapist. And I vividly remember her saying to me, "Mom, I'm so sorry that I wasted all of that time and money to become a teacher."
Mhm.
And I remember saying to her, "And what are you doing at Cardinal Glennon?"
Yeah.
And her saying, "Well, I'm teaching them how to do their breathing treatments and stuff." And
Oh,
I'm like,
teaching you.
"You're what? You're teaching?"
Yeah.
So I believe, just like you, after our conversation for sure, and you believed that before, but everything that we have went through, it's cool to see that full circle.
Yeah.
Like, even with me working, the light bulb didn't go on when I decided to become a grief specialist. After my daughters experiencing their pregnancy loss, until someone said to me, "Well, that makes sense that you're working with grief. You've worked at a funeral home for almost 15 years." And I was like,
Yeah.
I guess that was part of this grief thing
Right.
I'm doing.
I think it's
But until someone else points it out,
yeah.
you just don't make those
You
connections.
don't, and as you're going through life, you're just on this straight road, like, this is what I do
Yep.
next, and this is how I handle tomorrow, and
Yep.
tomorrow, and tomorrow, and,
Yeah.
you don't look back to see all that you've
Mhm.
accomplished already. You're just
Mhm.
trying to get to
Mhm.
the next day and to keep moving,
Yeah.
and that was what I was
Yeah.
doing. How do I get to tomorrow? How do I get to tomorrow? And until he's like, "Well, you're a writer." He's like, "You've been writing your whole life." Including
Yeah.
writing, teaching kids to write, because I was in, a language arts
Curriculum.
classroom and teaching history. He's like, "You have been writing. What are you talking about?" So, it was kind of that, "Okay, I hear you now."
Yeah, but I am a a woman of faith, and I believe that those people are put in our life
Mhm.
for a reason
Yeah.
to help us get those light bulb moments, get that awareness. Like, this is the path that I have set you upon,
Mhm.
sort of thing, and you've been being prepared for this.
Yeah.
Not that, the illness that was something that was put upon you, but just the path that you've gone down for
Right.
sure,
Right.
I think was played out. That if it hadn't been for the illness, there was a time where you were going to retire.
Yeah,
So I think
exactly.
that path was still going to happen, that you would come back to writing, even if it wasn't um, as quickly as it happened,
Yeah.
not what you wanted
Right.
that quickly. But
For
it was
sure.
awesome that you had those tools already.
Hmm.
Just needed that awareness to start using what you already had,
Yeah.
what you had been using.
And it really, and we talked about this before, that it really just became bigger than me, that I thought I was writing for other CRPS patients. And if you read the dedication inside
Hmm.
my book, it was really dedicated to RSDSA, which is the Reflex Sympathetic Dystrophy Syndrome Association. It's the CRPS Association. All of the
Well,
tools that they had that helped me kind of get through, in addition to having that counselor just kind of coach me along. Um, but if I didn't have those tools, I don't think I would have been able to understand it as well as I do now.
hmm.
But it became bigger. I just thought that I was writing to my CRPS symptoms down, and I was getting feedback from people who are dealing with mental illness or arthritis or fibromyalgia or loss or all of these other aspects. And very few people, which I should have known because of the percentage of CRPS, that it became bigger than me because there were other people who could look at it and
Hmm.
say, "I get it. I understand that,
Hmm.
and I feel seen, and I feel heard." And those are the people that I'm glad they found me, and I'm glad that it's doing work for them, and helping them along whatever journey they might be on.
To that point, if there's listeners here that maybe they feel like, they're relating to this, that this is part of their
Mhm.
story in some way, but they feel like like I'm letting people down. I'm letting all of the students down, and maybe my
Mhm.
family or whatever. What would you want to share with them? Gently remind them about who they still are, or to me, they're more than that diagnosis.
Right. And I think that's one thing that I had to remind myself was what makes me, who I really, really am inside, is not the teacher. It's not the wife. It's not the mom. It's not the best friend. It's not the neighbor. It's not any of those titles, but it's the integrity and it's the caring and it's the empathy and it's all of those other things that make you up inside as a person. Those are the
Mhm.
things that's who you are. So if you can put the other things inside of a little bubble for a little while, all of those titles, how are you empathetic? How have you cared about people? How have you cared for your neighbor? Whatever it is, if you can speak to those things, that's a win. That's an
Mhm.
absolute win. And it's all of those little things adding up, to say, you know what, I took care of my dogs today. But that's a win. That doesn't mean that I'm a pet owner. That's a title, but I cared for an animal today. Or I took, groceries to my neighbor today. I cared for my neighbor today. I'm a caring person. I cared for my neighbor today. I
Mhm.
saw a child fall down on the sidewalk and I helped them up. That's not me being a mom, and that's what I do as a mom. That's me being a caring person and having empathy for somebody else that I can pick them up. So if you can recognize those things that, those other pieces of identity, those other things that make up your character, even if
Mhm.
it's one thing, there is hope and that gets you moving forward. And that's what had to happen for me. I had to get rid of all of the titles. I'm not those titles.
Mhm.
The only
Yeah.
title I really have is my name. My name is Patty, and I'm a woman, and I'm empathetic, and I'm caring, and I wanna help people. Those are the things that make me up, not the titles, not all of the other things. So that's what I
That's
would
beautiful.
say.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with
Yeah.
them. And I'm in total agreement. When I started the podcast, almost 6 years ago, that was my very first question to my guests. And I kind of got away from it a little bit, but I usually kind of bring it in at some point. Was who are you
Mm-hmm.
outside of your titles?
Yeah.
And or what do you enjoy outside
Mm-hmm.
of, those titles? Because we as a society, when we introduce ourselves or somebody introduces themselves up, it's the titles that
Oh,
always come
absolutely.
first.
Percent.
That's how we feel like we're identified by, and really we're not. I mean, it's kind of like we're in the St. Louis area. In St. Louis, they always ask, what high school do you
Oh,
go
yeah.
to? And you may not know that with the military coming here, but if you're in St. Louis, they want to know what high school you went to so that they can get some idea of what area you grew up
Mm-hmm.
and what your demographics, you like all of that, geographically where you are, all of those things. But it's not who you are
Right.
as a person just because you went to that high
No,
school is what I'm like, I went to a high school that you don't know. That's where I
that's where I went. I come from a place that you would not know about, but that doesn't make me who I
Yeah.
am.
No, no. So share with us just a little bit about the book, where people can find the book.
Sure.
If they would like to get a hold of that, where's the best way to do that?
Sure, sure. So the book can be ordered anywhere. If you type in the title Brave Bird by Patricia Sauer, my government name, as we would say, you will find it. You can purchase it anywhere. But I recommend supporting local. So you can always get on bookshop.org and you can choose a local bookstore in your area to purchase. The credit will go to that, but it's an online order system. You can get on my website, which is Patricia Sauer at squarespace.com. You can order it there. But one of the easiest ways, if you're in the St. Louis area, you can always pop into Belleville Books in Belleville, Illinois, and you can catch me there. I'm in and out a couple days a week, but my book is also there, and my friends there at the bookshop can always point you in the right direction. So, yeah,
I love that.
yeah,
Where I met you, and yeah, like you said, where your book is being sold. They're super nice there.
yes,
Cute, quaint little place. Was that a bank?
it was. It was
Is that,
originally a
yeah,
bank, and so
so an old bank.
everybody comes in to see the vault because the vault
Yeah,
in the
so
building is still there, and it is our
yeah,
history area. We put everything in history inside the vault. So
I love it.
just coming to
I
see
love
the vault is, something to see. It's pretty incredible that it still is in such pristine shape, and it is like artwork within the bank. So, yeah.
it's cool.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So if you're in the area, stop by and see that for sure. So anything else that you wanted to share before we end that maybe I didn't touch on and that is you think is super important for the listeners to hear or
The only
know?
other thing that I would say is there is another side. Grief does slowly heal. It never goes
Mm,
away. And it comes back in sadness and memories sometimes, but hope is on the other side.
mhm.
Grace for yourself is the first thing that you have to that that would be the only other thing I would say.
Beautiful, beautiful. That is beautiful. And I'm so glad that you sought out support. I
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
always encourage
Mhm.
people when you're going through things like that, seek out a professional to support and help you. Whether it be me, my co host Louina, or someone in your
Mhm.
area, it's super important to seek out that professional support
Right.
to,
For sure.
I'll say, maybe give you a little pat on the back and say, remember what you used to do? Here it is for you.
Yeah.
Whatever support or help that they could give
Yeah.
you because they are so helpful. So I want to thank you so much for taking this time with us today. That your honesty, your courage, and your willingness to share really a part of your journey that are often hidden by the grief, the anger, the
Mhm.
identity of loss, all of those things, and just take a few minutes with us to really slow down. And I want to honor the work of the RSDSA
Mhm.
which Patti credits to the vital resources in understanding and navigating life of CRPS. So, not only for the patients, but also caregivers
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
well. If today's conversation resonated with you and you can find Patti's book, Bereaved Bird, like she said, wherever books are sold, shop local though, and especially encourage people to shop local. At, she said, bookshop.org. Is that correct?
Bookshop.org.
Bookshop.org.
And you can
Yeah.
choose,
Or go,
yeah, you can choose a
yeah,
local bookstore in your area that you want the credit to
love
go
that.
towards, which is wonderful.
I love that. So, most importantly, if you're listening and struggling with illness, mental health, or loss of identity, let this be a reminder. Asking for help is not a weakness. Like you said, there is hope, and healing doesn't mean becoming who you were, it means rediscovering who you are now. So, thank you again, Patti, so much for coming in and sharing with us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.